500,000 Teslas sold in China in 2020, causing Tesla's stock price to double again. That's the focus of our show today. We have our usual health tips and one or two other cleanup items relative to the vehicle sales that was just announced. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Wanted to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. If you enjoy the show, please take time to like and subscribe. Also wanted to note we have a survey question for this show, which is one of our Patreon supporters mentioned that because we were doing kind of one show a day, his browser was getting stacked with the number of shows we had, and our response was that if there's valid information to cover, we're definitely going to put the shows out, but if not, we won't. And so we wanted to get your opinion on pace of shows because we definitely want to stay on top of the news. So today's show is driven by the fact that yesterday, the 3rd of January, as predicted, Tesla came out with a 112,000 vehicles sold number. At the end of that announcement, it was announced by corporate headquarters that there was a 3,000 or 1,000 a week confirmed delivery of vehicles going on for China currently in terms of production, but not yet in customer hands. It was also noted by corporate that they were capable of 3,000 a week. So if you go 6 days a week at 280 vehicles a day, approximately 3,000 vehicles a week was currently confirmed. But the focus of our show today is the fact that it was also announced that at the end of December, a transition had occurred where the packs that are being used in the factory are now being produced in China. So the 3,000 a week number that was put out was excluding any of the numbers generated with pack production being local next door in the battery or pack production element of the factory. So this prompted a holy smoke, unbelievable response from us. The original thought we had was that when they said pack production, they meant that, the process is you get cells, those cells are put into packs, and then those packs are, you attach the thermal management system to that, and then that's a complete unit that sits under the car that's shipped out. So it's our understanding then that what's happening is both the cells and then the completed packs that come from those cells are now being produced in China. And we have to say, wow, unbelievable, amazing. And this is amazing for a whole bunch of reasons. One could think of, for example, the Reno facility took 3.5 years to build to get up to the 500,000 production per annum that they're capable of, or were capable of at about 30 gigawatt hours. The next sort of wow on this is that what this suggests is that, when you do construction, there's a process that goes on where there's activity below ground that you can't see coming out, but the above ground activity tends to be what most consumers see, and the perception is that's when progress is being made. The reality is that the foundation of buildings often can take way longer than the top side of the building can take. And so in this case, we should be reminded that in September is when we first, there was some initial production starting in the Shanghai plant, but what then happened was there was noticeable above ground construction happening next door in what was stated to be the battery production area. That building was closed at the end of October, beginning of November, and according to Tesla headquarters, they've actually now begun producing cells and completed packs at that facility. And given the pace that's occurred in other places for Tesla on this, that's pretty mind-boggling. Another implication is that there's a big discussion of was it CATL or LG that would be producing there, but until we get other notice, Tesla's producing its own batteries and doesn't have Panasonic as a partner there. So that's amazing because in theory, if it's done well, Tesla's margins actually improve with that location. So we're going to get an answer. This is going to be the number one question anyone's going to answer as we get a shot at Elon Musk in the beginning of February when they do the official announcement on numbers. But basically what this suggests is that the packs that they can afford to, if you will, surrender or ship over from the US amount to about 3,000 vehicles a week. And then the next question is how many packs are they able to produce in the new location? And our theory is at least 3,000 to double that amount. But based on Elon's argument, they should be at a 10,000 a week production level by the time Model Y is rolling out, perhaps in late spring. So now you have a really interesting situation because the current stock price of Tesla anticipates the fact that the max is about 100, maybe 150,000 vehicles coming out of that facility. If in fact Elon delivers on his threat to deliver 10,000 vehicles a week, both Model 3 and the cheapest version of both the Model Y and the Model 3, that is mind-blowing stuff because I think it's going to have a big impact on where the company goes from here. Another sort of question mark that comes up in the unbelievable realm is that there's from what we've seen from the drone footage from the factory, is the fact that the 280 vehicles per day times 6 days generates a certain number of vehicles. If China goes ahead and uses the new employees recruited over the last 2 weeks to increase it to 2 shifts a day, we now have an interesting situation where there's potential for that facility to easily bounce up to about 6,000 vehicles a week. And now we're in an interesting situation where the road to 10,000 vehicles is not that difficult to imagine. Another data point that comes up here is that we kept wondering how China was going to achieve the numbers that they talked about. And what we're talking about here is by 2025, China wants to have, of their 27 million vehicles sold, they want 25% of them to be EV vehicles. And so how are you going to get there? And if Tesla is going to occupy about 80% market share, that means theoretically Tesla ends up in that 4 to 5 million vehicles a year coming out of the China facilities, and that doesn't have anything to do with what's being done in other parts of the globe. So basically what that means to us then is that they're going to have to build at least one new gigafactory in each of the next 4 years. If your goal is about 4 million or so vehicles, you possibly need to build 2, but at least one is going to have to be built. And you can run those really hard to meet demand that's coming up from consumers. So the question, we've got all these great questions out there. Part of the answer came in the announcement that this new production of packs was available. Another part that kind of popped up was that we're kind of trying to figure out what the difference is between statements made by the Chinese facility and statements made by headquarters, because I think the headquarters obviously has more credibility. According to headquarters, they are at 30% locally based production at this point, and it's been stated that the goal is to get that up to 100%. So I have to admit, we're a little skeptical of that. The main reason being that what Tesla has stated is that if they have other people that do certain things better than they do, then they will allow those entities to do those tasks, in terms of building parts. So approximately, and from what we can gather, in the United States, Tesla is vertically integrated to the tune of about 70%. And there are a number of German companies primarily that produce harnesses as well as internal components to the cars. The doors on Model X comes to mind as well. So there's a number of parts that don't come from Tesla. And so we were thinking there's no way they get to 100% because you actually have to get those suppliers to move to China or kick them out or replace them with someone else. So we don't have an answer to how that's going to work. So we were skeptical about that 100% target. But in theory, if you show your suppliers, a roadmap to 4 or 5 million vehicles a year, there's a good chance that they could actually push forward to, to validating opening up production facilities nearby and being able to supply that factory on a just-in-time basis. So we actually look forward to seeing what this answer is going to be coming from Elon and company. But we were kind of surprised to see the announcement of the beginning of pack production in China being kind of a footnote. And that footnote is giant because now we don't have to worry about pack production being determined by the volume that can be produced in Reno. That component can be sort of locally sourced / next door. And then the only other holdup, well, there's the drivetrain to be considered, which I think they could build there. And then the motors are still coming from Reno. But as we know, the motors, for example, are a fairly automated process. And in that case, the hindrance to forward progress of speed isn't as severe as what you might have when it comes to the battery packs. So we wanted to say congratulations to Tesla and the Chinese folks. The fact that this has started is huge. Another thing that popped up for us was there's this open question, and that was Tesla wasn't allowed to sell vehicles, but the test production started in late September, early October, and there were cars that were rolling out that the press was driving, etc. But there was sort of an open question as to why Tesla wasn't ramping rapidly to maximum production right away, because you actually have a waiting list for a $42,000 Tesla. There's actually, we believe, between 100,000 and 200,000 people waiting list for the vehicle. So we were kind of surprised that they were delaying massive ramp. And with the start of battery production, I think that this sort of answers the question of perhaps why they were delaying, because one, they knew that this battery capability would become available. Two, you actually didn't necessarily have enough packs to meet the ramp numbers that China might want to do. And so I think that this is bombshell news. And the only thing that could be bigger than the news related to the start of pack development or build in China is when we're going to get to, Model Y delivery, because Model Y's numbers are going to be higher in terms of production. But once we get to Model Y arrivals, let's say hopefully late spring instead of summer, now you have a whole different group of consumers that'll be interested, and it'll be fairly easy to hit the 500,000 in sales because of those two different types of vehicles within the range of consumers able to buy. So there's actually a current executive of Tesla before she joined Tesla that kind of put out some numbers that I think are appropriate to consider here, and that is sort of size of your buying population. So it turns out that, let's say for vehicles above 50,000, above 50,000, let's say there's 1 million potential buyers in that space. Once you drop down to 40,000, the buying population actually jumps to 3 or 4 million potential people in that space. And you can see that as that number drops, let's say into the 20s or low 30s, you further double or triple the size of the buying population. So no, Tesla's $42,000 cheapest Model 3 in China is not, the widest population in the sub $30,000 market, but it's a pretty fascinating circumstance that's emerging, which is that Tesla's China operations are becoming sort of a dominant force, quite obviously, and we think that it's going to generate some huge numbers going forward. Tesla hasn't been breaking out the numbers across what sold where, but we'll be fascinated to watch how this plays out in the near term, and we're happy to report on it. So I wanted to say, after I caught the pack startup component, my initial reaction to the statements made regarding we're at 30% now, and we anticipate getting to 100% was a big surprise for us, because we actually thought that for some reason Elon would just expand Reno and ship more batteries and not produce any on site. So note, there is an error in my statement. I've been corrected on this several times. There's a difference between cell production, which is the little small items, and pack production. So both cells and packs are required as a finished item to get the car moving, and so hence that's kind of how things will work. Anyway, I wanted to note that I'm seeing a ranging conversation here. We're at the point in the show where typically we avoid any comments until near the end, so that those not viewing live will get unfettered access to what the story is before they get into the dialogue going on between folks. So we're happy to field questions that you might have based on either what we've covered here or covered previously. We also wanted to sort of dabble in looking at what happened with the stock price just now. Clearly, we have what we think is our first bump in value. The estimation that we have is that the analysts now have a chance to digest those numbers, and we're going to hear from institutional buyers and investors middle of next week, sometime around Wednesday or Thursday. We'll start seeing either buying or selling, depending on what their take is and the analysts have recommended. And so our estimate is that it's going to be on the positive side. So do not be surprised if we see a rather intense push of Tesla's stock price up from here. There's one other thing that we wanted to cover today, and I was just going to mention to you guys, and that is that we have a show we're going to be posting this afternoon, and what that show focuses on is the fact that there's been an open question as to whether or not Tesla could take market share from domestic manufacturers, given that they're rolling in at lower prices. And so the show that we've developed really focuses on research we've done combined with an entity called Quark and their analysis of what's going to happen when Tesla has large numbers of vehicles in reasonable price point relative to the Chinese market. And, just a hint of what the show has to say is that there's actually a dealer in China who made the comment, you should be aware that when it comes to EVs or used EVs, Tesla retains about 70% of its value after year one. And after year three, they're still at 60% of their value, but all these vehicles relate to what's been going on with the Model X and S. So this dealer in China informed the newspaper that the only vehicle that we purchase on a used basis for resale is Tesla. We don't buy any of the domestically produced electric vehicles for resale to our customers. So this is sort of a hint of what our show is about, and I think you'll find it interesting, and we look forward to your comments there. Don't forget, we actually do want to get your feedback on our thought process regarding a number of shows being produced. My response to our Patreon supporter was that we're kind of in an intense news period for Tesla that will slowly die down. And so we're happy to modify volume of shows if there's nothing to say because there's actually nothing happening. But there's a lot of ammunition going back and forth right now that represents, we think, excellent source of stories that represent useful information that are impactful, hence the volume of shows. At any rate, I appreciate, I could see Harry, Jerry, Donovan, a nice raging conversation here. I think what we're going to do is go ahead and clip and paste the conversation that was going on beyond our show. And, we'll thanks for that comment, Randall. You're right. If there's high resale values, leasing becomes easier for consumers because the leasing companies have a pretty good idea what the value is going to be after those vehicles come after lease. So that's something I didn't think of, Randall. Excellent point. And another reason why consumers in China have a good reason to move towards Teslas. At any rate, I wanted to say Happy New Year to all of you. Thanks for joining us once again. Don't forget 5-2 diet or something in that fasting zone. It might be something for you to consider. Number one. Number two, leg lifts. 25 of them per leg each day helps maintain the quad muscles so you don't have knee issues. Number three is don't forget to go to bed not within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4 to let the food digest. And finally, once a week fried foods is probably a good idea as well. Thanks once again for joining us. We look forward to your post-show comments. We have our PayPal support info there because we definitely have new equipment that we want to put in to do a better job. Number one. Number two, we also have our Patreon link there if you'd like to support in that fashion. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Have a great day. Look forward to your comments. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, Lehitraut, Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi, Hejdo, Swedish, and in Zdravstvuyte, hello in Russian, Ni hao ma, Chinese. Wanted to say, again, thanks for the great conversation and taking time out to join us. Have a great day. Bye for now. Don't forget to like and subscribe.